So far, what we've seen is that the Ramchal describes the components of the Bria, of the creation, in a certain structure. He says that obviously there's a physical aspects of the universe, the creation, and that includes the sky, the earth, and so on, That's obvious to us. But he also says that there are also spiritual components to the creation itself. What are the spiritual components? So if you look from the top down, there's the Ribono Shel Olam, there's God himself. And then there are what's called his emanations, which are Kabbalistically they're called the spheres. So those are the emanations, and they are really considered divine. Although we are not familiar with their nature, but they are forces that are considered divine forces. See. Now, they produce several fundamental components, elements of the Bria. The spheres, which are the divine forces which God uses to create, and they create different realities. You see. The first reality that they create is Olam Haba, the future world. They create the reality of the future world. And that is the highest Olam, that is the highest world. That's completely spiritual. But it's interesting that the type of spirituality of that world is really unknown. It's much greater, as we will see, than the spiritual world of which is right above us. In other words, fundamentally, creation is made of two different areas. One is called the future world. That's Olam Haba, which the spheres create first. And the second world is called Olam Hazeh, this world. And Olam Haba, of course, is the highest reality, which is ultimately the future world. And the second world that evolves ultimately from the spheres is the highest would be, and it is spiritual, even though it's part of Olam Hazeh, this world. In Kabbalah it's called Atzilus, and in that world the only resident really is the Ribono Shel Olam. Not that, it's God resides in all the worlds. The question is, to what degree is he manifested or revealed? To what degree is the manifestation of God? So in Olam Haba, that's the greatest manifestation of all. And that itself goes on infinitely in terms of what his manifestation is. But in Olam Hazeh, there is a spiritual world called Atzilus, in which he also manifests, but almost infinitely lower than the future world. Underneath that, there's a world called Bria, creation. Then under that, there's another spiritual world called Yetzirah, formation. Then under that, there's this world called Olam Hasiyah, which again is divided. It's divided to the Olam HaShafel, which is this physical world, which is 13.7 billion light years. And then it also has 7 heavens, which are spiritual, even though it's Olam Hasiyah. And that's really the total of creation. But then there's another world, which is after our world, which is called the Olam of the Sitra Achra. It's the world of evil. It's the world that is dominated by the Satan and all his minions, so to speak. So these are the different worlds that are created by the spheres, ultimately. You see, God created everything out of nothing, which means nothing coexists with God. He had to create everything. God exists, but nothing coexists with him, and therefore God has to create everything. So the first thing he creates, of course, basically, are the spheres, his emanations. These forces are what he uses to create all the other realities below. You see. And like I said, most people don't realize, but Olam Haba, the future world, was created first. And then it degrades until finally you get to this physical world. Ultimately, all the worlds, the realities will be reversed. And what it means to be reversed ultimately is that you're going to go from this world, which is the physical world, into a higher world, which is Yetzirah. We're going backwards. And the world will then retransform into Yetzirah, Atzilus, and then into Olam Haba. So you start from Olam Haba and you go back to Olam Haba. You see? And in fact, if you think about it, there's a Sefer Bar here that says, if you wanted to say the future world, how would you say it in Hebrew? How would you say the world to come in Hebrew? You'd say Olam Sheyavoy, the world that will come. What's this Olam Haba? So the Sefer Bar says Haba means that came. In other words, Olam Haba is the world that came. That is the future world. See? So really it was created first, and then we are going to go back to that which was created first, and that's why we call it Olam Haba, means the world that came. You see? So that's interesting what Olam Haba really means. But it certainly is the fact that God created all these realities, and the ultimate task is for the Jews really to retransform the creation back into its original state, which of course is the future world. That's really what the purpose of the Jew. The Ramchal calls it later on, he called it before, he calls it zikuch, to purify the world. And that's really what we do. We purify the world, this world, by removing its physicality. And once the physicality is removed, it becomes spiritual, and then it further retransformed, so higher spiritual, until it turns into the future world. So what's important about that is if somebody would ask you, where's Olam Haba? You would say, of course, Olam Haba is here. It's here. Except it doesn't look like Olam Haba. It is Olam Haba that has been degraded into a physical world. And ultimately, Olam Haba is here, and we do that, the Jews do that, by retransforming the creation back from this physical world into Olam Haba. That's called Zikuch. And that's what the mitzvahs do, and so on. In any case, so that's what the spheres do, and the spheres create the neshama, the soul, and the soul is an entity, it's a spiritual entity that derives from the spheres, and it is an entity that will ultimately enter a physical body and be bound to that physical body. And even though there's such a thing called death, I mentioned before, that death really is an abnormality. What God wanted is that the soul should enter the physical body and never leave. So what would happen is that the soul, the individual doing the mitzvahs, would actually remove the physicality from the body itself. So the soul would never leave the body, but it would have to remove the physicality, the materiality of the physical body, and then the body would ultimately become sort of like a sheet of transparent, which is completely transparent. But because of the sin of Adam Rishon, the first man, therefore death was decreed, for whatever reason, and therefore the soul must separate from the body, go to a waiting station called Gan Eden, and then when it's right, there will be Tchias HaMesim, which is the re-entry of the soul to its body, and it will remain in its body for eternity. Never leaves. But what it will do is retransform the body from physical, and in many ways it almost like dematerializes the body, where the body becomes a clear, transparent sheet of clothing, whatever you want to say, and then the soul completely dominates. You see, that's what would ultimately happen, and so on. And just like it happens to the body, it happens to the entire physical universe. Which is what the Ramchal says. You see, so we have the neshama.
What does it mean that in the end that the goof will be a simcha to the neshama?
That the goof will be a simcha
For the neshama.
Yeah, because the neshama will have retransformed the goof into a completely spiritual, almost spiritual state. So that is a simcha to the neshama, and it's not only that the neshama has done that to the goof, but that the goof no longer blocks the reality of the transparency of the neshama, because a physical body blocks the neshama from doing what it can do. Its power The neshama has an enormous spiritual power that really should have immediately purified the body. But God decreed, the Ramchal says this, that it can't, so therefore it can't. But by being in a physical body, the neshama, it's sort of like, it's all potential sort of, but there's no actual. It can't, energize with whatever spiritual energy it has, and therefore, because it's not blocked. So it can't do that. So that's the second simcha. You see, that the neshama is joyful that the body no longer exists in its form. So it has helped the body in that sense, elevate itself. And the second simcha is that it is now not blocked by this material body, which enormously reduces and limits the power of the neshama.
In terms of madrigos,
but why is that a source of simcha? That's a removal of a problem, not a source of simcha.
Most people, when they remove a problem, they're really happy about it. That's what I would think, right? People are happy when they enjoy something that they want, or they're happy when there's an obstacle that's blocking them. So there's an incredible joy. And besides, you have to, there's also the concept that it's free will.
But that means it's a removal of something that was a problem, not that it's a source of it.
Of course.
But it says that the goof is the source of the simcha.
Well, yeah, because the neshama, like I said.
It doesn't say that you're removing the problem of achieving your simcha. That means the simcha is really originating from the neshama. But it's saying that the goof is actually the source. So what's its contribution? It's not. It's not the goof is not the source. But the fact that the neshama's interaction with the body is the source of enormous joy, because it has removed that physicality by its own free will, you see, and therefore that is a feeling of divinity, because only God is a true cause. But like this, the neshama is the cause of the removal or the changing transformation of the guf, and then it's also unblocked. So it's a source of joy.
That also helped to do the avoider.
What's that?
Helped to do the avoider, the work. The body helped the neshama to do the work.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course. Well, yeah, that's the contribution of the body. Look, the real purpose of a physical universe, I think I said last week, is to block the neshama. Therefore, the neshama is forced to engage in a task. Without a guf, there would be no task for the neshama. It is spiritual, and it's not blocked. But the physical universe creates a task, and the neshama has to, sign up for that task, so to speak, in order for it itself to be able to manifest its incredible power. But that's why there's a physical universe. Other than that, what do you need a physical universe for? We can just have Olam Haba right away, right? But you remember a long time ago, I said the concept of Namlik Sufa, bread of shame, that the only way the neshama, I don't want to get into the whole thing, but what main thing is that the neshama needs to have a task for which it will then feel that it has done a true action because of itself, which is a free will, and that's why we have a physical universe. You see, anyway, other than that, it's not necessary. Yeah?
In terms of madrigos, there's the neshama enters the body with the potential to fully mizdakek the body.
To mizakech the body. Purify.
The body. But it's stopped by Kadosh Baruch Hu and piecemeal as it does mitzvahs.
Well, the mitzvah is the trigger that allows it to mizakech, purify the body.
Right. So now that there are multiple mitzvahs, and there's supposed to be a one-shot deal.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be one shot. Now that failed, there's madrigos. So, in terms of madrigos, a person only gets as much as he did.
Yeah.
So now you have now you have a neshama with a potential of 100%. But because in Olam Haza he only did 60%, so he's only allowed to use mizakik to go 60%.
No, doesn't work that way.
So how does it work?
See, there are two key elements to this whole thing. The whole concept of removing an obstacle, which is to purify a physical universe and bring it up to the level of what's called Olam Haba. In Kabbalah it's called Adam Kadmon, primordial man, Ak. Okay, so the first thing is to retransform reality. That's the first thing. And the reality that it wants to get to from this physical reality is Olam Haba.
Okay.
Once you're in Olam Haba, there's no obstacles anymore.
Okay.
There it's a matter of how much God will you be dovok to. You see? So there's two concepts here. Well, actually there's three, if you want to really look at it. The totality of the necessities to achieve, right? The first thing is to remove the tumah that exists in material, right? Adam Rishon sin allowed the world.
Hashem can't do that though.
No, wait. The sin of Adam Rishon allowed the Satan to put its hooks into Olam Hazeh.
Right.
So that's one thing. So therefore, there's a threefold events that occur. One is you need to remove the tumah, the contamination of a satanic being, the Satan. That's tumah. So that's the job of Mashiach ben Yosef. The second job, right, is to remove the physicality. You see, that's to change the universe from a physical universe to a spiritual, and that is the job of Mashiach ben David. See, but then you're left with a neshama, with a body that is transformed, right? That is Olam Haba, and then so the world has achieved its tikkun. The tikkun is the changing of reality from a physical to a completely spiritual world, which is the Olam Haba. But that's not what goes on in Olam Haba. What goes on in Olam Haba now is the attachment to God that each person will experience to the extent of his avodah, of his service. You see? So there are really three things. Remove the tumah, remove the chomer, material, and then bring down the dvekus. You see? So bringing down the dvekus is that which goes on in Olam Haba for eternity.
That's Madregos.
What was that?
And that's Madregos.
Yeah, those are the levels based on your avodah, that to that extent you will experience God.
So the neshama, will the neshama feel that I could have got? There's that feeling. I mean, obviously it must be experienced in Shemayim sometime, but in Olam Haba, after all said and done, will he still feel that kind of pang that I could have gotten more?
No, because that pain would be with him for eternity. I mean, then Olam Haba would turn into being a Gehenna.
Right.
Can you imagine being Gehenna? If a person thought about what he could have done, and meanwhile he's looking at the other guy, this guy's way up there, and although they're both experiencing tremendous, don't get me, what they're experiencing in Olam Haba is infinite. But relatively speaking, this guy's, so or else that would be an eternal Gehenna.
Right.
So obviously that has to be removed.
Right.
And also, does anybody really know what the other guy is experiencing?
Right.
You don't know. He may be saying, wow, this is incredible, but meanwhile you're saying this is incredible, but you don't know his incredible, it's greater than your incredible. There's no way to measure that. You know what I'm saying? Because relatively speaking, it's just incredible what's going on. We have no idea the joy, that a person has in Olam Haba. We don't even know. I mean, they say, there's an example where they say that, if you took all the joy of a person's life, all the minutes of joy, right, that he experienced throughout his lifetime, right, and then you combine that with everybody else who lived in his generation, and then you combine that with everybody who ever lived, all that's pretty powerful simcha, right? All the pleasure, the joy, right, including the drug addicts, right? Right? Or it doesn't make a difference where you got the joy from, right? That wouldn't be equal to 1 second in Olam Haba. So how are we going to figure this out? It's impossible. You see? And that, like I say, if you want to know the definition of Olam Haba, right? It's infinite joy eternally. It's really all it is,
Now how do you combine the concept of this idea where we have our own personal experiential feeling of the Vegas with the Banashram, the idea of being a Klal Yisrael who should have some type of fully unified experience of the Banashram. How does the individual fit within the cloud?
I don't know what you mean.
What's the interaction? In other words, all of Klal Yisrael,
Each individual is experiencing that, right?
Yes.
Well, that's really that's different.
Okay, so you have a Klal Yisrael who has to do the tikkun. It's not an individual tikkun. Everyone has their own individual tikkun within the Klal Yisrael, but
yes,
ultimately Klal Yisrael has an overall tikkun that he has to do.
Yes.
So what's this interaction between the Klal and the individual in Olam Haba in terms of that experiential?
Well, and basically, what justice demands is that each individual will receive individual joy, reward, right? It has to be, or else you're not going to.
Now, how does that interface with the idea that the Klal Yisrael has to?
That's a different idea. The concept of a klal, because what the Hashem created really is one neshama. You see, He didn't create, although it looks like He created many neshamas. In the beginning, there was only one neshama, and that was Adam Rishon. And what that neshama did is it split. So therefore, each aspect or each neshama part, right, is mystically still one. It's really so the what's called the mitzius, the existence of the neshama is really one, which is fragmented into millions. But even though they're fragmented, really they're not. In the higher worlds, there is no fragmentation, but there is in terms of each fragment getting its own reward. But in some way, maybe the best way I can describe it, for everything that God does, there's always a physical analog, yeah. And I once said, what's the analog of what I'm trying to describe? Where it's really the neshama is really one block that has different consciousnesses or individuality. Remember I once described it? Siamese twins. A Siamese twin is an interesting kind of bria. Well, it's a human, a person's human, where it's really one body, but it has two heads. So obviously they have to separate that, and so on, And sometimes they can't, and then they have to make choices. Who gets the heart, obviously, and so on. Whatever. But a Siamese twin is really one person, right, that has two heads, you see. And really, they are, so what are they? Are they two or one? So you could think about that, if it's really two or one. If you have, sometimes they share a heart, and you got real problems, there's one heart for two people, or whatever they got, a liver, whatever. So what are we talking about here? You have two different people looking at each other. You know what I'm saying? I mean, could you imagine a Siamese twin on a boat, and one of them says, hey, I want to commit suicide. You know what I'm saying? And so the other guy said, well, you crazy? If you commit suicide, I'm out, because we have one body, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that would be sort of comical. But, and that's really the Jewish body. That's why if a person sins in one place, every Jew is affected, because it's one guf, you see. So you're trying to describe there's a reality of chad, of one. That's true. But there has to be some type of distinct individuation even of the one. And it is that, whatever the difference in consciousness is, each one receives what they did to the degree that they did it. Even though the Metzius is in some way that it's really one. But that's a different concept.
What is
anyway.
That one in all? What is that one?
What is the neshama? What is the neshama? We don't even know what the neshama is. How we know if it's divided? We don't know what the neshama really is. We do not know what its fragmentation is. Obviously, it's not. I mean, right now it's unanswerable.
Regarding the neshama, in Das Tavunos, Ramal talks about Chelik Elokai, and the
Chelik Elokai Mimal, yeah.
Right. But the English translation I have of the Sefer translates it as portion, not part. And what's interesting is the more Hasidic form, like Tanya, translated as part.
And I'm wondering if the Ramchal
Yeah.
would agree that there's parts of Hashem, because that would
No.
violate the Ramchal.
No.
He would not agree.
No. I mean, I don't know. I once gave a whole show who is God. One of the ideas that we know about God is that he's pashut. He's simple.
There can't be parts there.
No, there are no parts. How many parts are there to the human?
Many.
Many? Try 100 trillion. How's that sound?
Cells, yeah.
I mean, they're parts.
14 trillion. Maybe.
No, 100 trillion. The question is if there are 10 and the rest are bacteria, whatever, however they count it, But there's at least 10 trillion parts in the human. Then when you have all the, in the gut, there's a whole ensemble of bacteria, trillions of bacteria and all that are just piggybacking on us, So there's, we are 10 trillion parts. It's incredible, right? But God has no parts. God is indivisible. But anyway.
What about the Kabbalists who talk about there's 5 parts in the Neshama?
That's different.
Okay, but do you think the Ramchal would ever agree with that? Or?
No, of course he does. It's Kabbalistically, of course.
But
But anyway, I'm getting off the track. Oh, good. Anyway, yeah. So you have the spheres, you have the neshama, then you have what's called the transcendental forces, which the Ramchal, which we're learning, is called koiches nivdolim. These are transcendental forces, and what they really are is that this is it's a reality which is a counterpart to the physical reality. Everything in the physical world has a chain or a spiritual part that is connected to him. Best way to look at that is the marionettes. There's a guy on top with the wood, the controller, then you have the marionettes. And the marionettes are completely controlled by the device that controls their movements, you see? And so therefore, same thing. There is a control device. We are replicated in an upper world, exactly. And if you move yourself as you are represented in an upper world, you will move accordingly. You must move the way those things are situated. You see. So therefore, really, every physical object has a spiritual object which is its counterpart in a different dimension. I've spoken about that. Okay? Now, therefore, movement can go either way. When a person moves his arm, for instance, then the counterpart of that arm of you moves up there. You see, it's like a marionette. If the marionette was able to move its arm independent of the control device, then the string that connects you would also move, or vice versa. If you remove the control device, then the marionette will move. So therefore, there is what's called, every physical object has an spiritual extension in another domain. Now, and therefore what happens there, which I explained, is there's an angel, a malach, that is in control of every single control device. And the malach moves you based on a set of instructions that it follows. That's called nature. You see? So if a guy jumps off the roof, right, he will go down because there's a thing called gravity, you see? And therefore the malach will make sure that you will go down to follow that instruction, you see?
But he's not taking away the malach, is not taking away the man's free will.
No, I'm not getting to that. So therefore it's important to recognize that every physical thing has a spiritual counterpart, which is really that thing just stretched out into a spiritual universe. Okay? So therefore, and that is controlled by malachim. See? And which I had mentioned, okay? So you have the neshama created by the spheres, you have the transcendental forces created by the spheres, and you have the malachim, the angels, which are created by the spheres, in order to activate those transcendental forces, which is really you in an upper dimension. You see? So these are the fundamental components of the Bria, of how it works. So obviously there's millions and millions of details and so on, but that's fundamentally the structure of everything. You're either a sphera, a neshama, a transcendental force, a koyach nivdol, you're a malach, or a shade, which I talked about, right? And then there's a physical universe, and that's it. That's the whole Bria. And then, of course, there's the Rabbanu Shalom, you see? And all of this interacts, has that interaction, you see? Now, what the Ramchal also says is that all physical things are manipulated or controlled by their control device. What do you call that, the marionettes, when they have a name for it, the controller, I don't know what they call it, you know. But all things in nature, everything in this world is controlled, and therefore the force goes from up to down. The influence or the actual dynamic action starts from above in the spiritual realm, and therefore everything that starts from there must move in accordance with how that works, right? So therefore, anything that doesn't have free will must move based on the control device of the Koach Nivdal. So animals, for instance, they have no free will. So therefore the animal must move in accordance with the device, and the one who controls the animal is the Malach. And he's got his set of instructions. You see? Now a miracle is when the set of instructions changes. And that's called an S, because it's it's the constant, the regular prescription, script, is called Teva, nature, right? And if it deviates from that, it's called Nes. But it doesn't make a difference. It's always the same control. You see, a miracle doesn't change the manner of control, it just changes the script that the Malach reads.
When the Ramban, the famous Ramban about that there's no such thing as nace, ultimately. So is he just using nace in a loose term? The way you're defining nace is a set of changing the set in the instruction.
Correct.
The Ramban, when he says there is no nace, ultimately, all he's saying is that he's using the term loosely. That's my understanding of it.
What the Ramban is saying really is that the reason why there's no nace is because there's no nature.
And it's everything from a Kodesh. But he's looking.
Its own all it is a script. You see, that's what he means. There's no such thing as miracle because there's no such thing as nature. There's no such thing as regularity. And therefore, a deviation of that regularity would be a nes, a miracle.
Right.
But if there's no regularity, that itself is is not because there's some type of innate reason, scientific principle, then there's no such thing as miracle.
Right. So he's using a slightly different definition. My point is he using a slightly different definition? The definition that's usually used by people, as opposed to the definition that the Ramchal and you are giving. The Ramchal gives the difference between a nace and teva is the instructions. Are the instructions the same or different?
That's it.
The Ramban is looking at it as the way people more colloquially use it in terms of a natural phenomenon defined by scientific principles as opposed to something that's magical. So now he's taking that approach, and from that point of view, there is no such thing as teva as something that's solely based on scientific principle. Everything's from a Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Correct.
But the way I'm just saying that the Ramchal's defining it slightly differently. So it's when I go back and tell people there is such a thing as teva, and they say, well, the Ramban said there is nothing. There is no teva. I say, well, there is. The Ramchal says there is. Just he's defining it differently. Teva is from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So I'm saying the definition, it's a difference of definition. The Ramban is speaking to, there's not that he's defining ultimately what Teva is differently, not that he's arguing with Ramchal, but people usually define it differently than the Ramchal's defining it. People usually define Teva as something divorced from a Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Okay, yeah, okay, but let's keep it simple, okay? People define Teva, nature, that there is a real, absolute set of laws, right, that never vary or deviate, correct? And when they see a deviation, right, but they don't go into, what causes the laws itself. What makes the law? You see, what makes gravity always act? What makes gravity altogether? You see, they don't go into that. There exists a set of laws. They call it signs. When there's a deviation, it's called a miracle. It's almost as if God has to interfere with nature Nature is rigid. There's some type of unknown, absolute thing called nature. You see? And God has to intervene intervene with nature, right? That's the way they look at it. That's called a miracle. But they don't understand. The miracle is not a deviation. Nature is not a deviation. It's all script. If the angel has a script to do this, that becomes nature. It's if the frequency makes it nature. If there's a deviation, that when it never happens, then that's called a miracle. But the whole concept of what is nature, there's no absolute set of laws. You see, it's all the script, and who gave the script? God. So everything is from the Rebbe Hashem. But the Rebbe Hashem says, okay, here's your instruction sheet. And the Malach will always follow that instruction sheet and manipulate your spiritual counterpart. Let's call it your spiritual alter self, other self, But when the Rebbe Hashem wants, he can change the script, and all of a sudden the Malach manipulates the spiritual alter self, right? And all of a sudden you act differently, or anything acts differently. Now the interesting thing about that is that, right, is that the Rebbe Hashem can change a script. Yes, you can change a script because you have free will. You see, an animal cannot change its script, right? Whatever the angel does, so if you walk in front of a tiger and the tiger decides to eat you, right, and so on, that's because the script says that the Malach has to take this tiger and have you for dinner. You see? Unfortunately. Wait. But the question is, does the tiger really have to eat you? No. It's only the Malach getting the tiger to eat you. Where did you see a deviation? By Daniel in the lion's den, right? Right? These are a whole bunch of lions, right? And they hadn't been fed for a week, right? So your chances were there was no chance that you would survive if you were thrown into that pit, right? And so on, right? Daniel went into the pit, and the lions just looked at him. Now, why did they look at him? Because the Malach who had the script had the lions looking at him. They have to do what their counterpart, how it's ordered or regulated, and the Malach does it. They have no choice, because in all things that have no free will, the influence will always go from top to bottom. It's called isarusa deli'ela, movement from above. You see, so all things that have no free will, the movement will always come from above. For those that have free will, it can go either way. You can be made to move by the instruction sheet above, which happens many times, or if you decide free will, then what happens is isarusa delatata, means the movement is from below, right? And you move, and then your stuff moves up there, and the Malach just allows it to be accommodated. Only man who has free will can do that. So the movement of this Malach, either God can change the script, man can change the script, and that's called free will. You see? But there are other ways to change the script, which I had mentioned. If you say Hashem, if you have intention, meditate on a divine name that refers to that particular angel, you will change his script. You can also change the script, not only by just moving around and doing whatever you want, right? But you can act, and that's kavanas, kabbalistic ma'aseh kabbalah. If you knew the correct name of God, you could change the script, and that Malach would have to do what you ordered. Exactly. You see, that's why you can get things on this table to levitate, even though there's gravity, because you will have changed the script for the objects on the table. So therefore, God can change the script, right? You can change the script by just acting with free will. You can change the script by meditating on divine names, you see, and that will order them on. There's another thing called kishuf, and that's not good, where you meditate on a shem tumah, a defiled name,
one of the things that refers to the Satan, right? You've altered that, right? And then the Satan can order the Malach to change the script. So there's a lot of different ways of accomplishing miracles. But the key in the end is you've got to change the script. That's the key, and that works. And now, who determines the script? And the answer is God. He is the one who issues the commands, and he says that 99.99% of the time, you got to look at the instruction sheet. 0.001, whatever it is, right? I will tell you, you need to do this. So the Malach just alters the alter self, right? And changes you. See? And so that's the concept. There's white magic, where you can alter the instructions of the Malach, right? By meditating on divine names, right? Then there's Kishuf, where you can alter the Malach doing what he does, not from changing the working through the spheres, you're working through what's called the Zoyam of the Satan. You see, that's called Kishuf. That has bad repercussions. Because when you benefit from the Satan, then he has a claim to your neshama. It's the old story with Devil and Daniel Webster. I think, who's it written by? The one with...
Charlie Daniels.
Who wrote that?
Charlie Daniels.
Who?
The devil with the golden fiddle.
Well, that's the famous Faust. I mean, Faust was the original.
The famous song also by Charlie Daniels.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote a book called The Devil and Daniel Webster. I think it's Daniel Webster who wrote the dictionary or whatever, where he made a pact with the devil, that he would have a great life and all that kind of stuff. It's a whole, But the opera Faust is that Faust made a pact with the devil. And in the end, the devil wants to come and take his soul, and somehow, I think he gets away with whatever, But that's the concept, But in other words, the Satan can also influence the Malachim by his Zoyamo, by his projected force. And he also changed the script. That's the key, Different things can change the Malach because of the arrangement, which is the alter self, spiritual alter self. That's why it can all be changed. But ultimately speaking, there is no absolute rule. It's all ness. Or I should say there's no ness, there's no nature. It all depends on what the script is.
I'm sorry, I have to respectfully disagree. I think the Maharal says that...
If you disagree with me, it can't be respectfully. No, I'm joking.
The Maharal says there's a natural order. And it's Perush on the Haggadah. There's a natural order. It's Hashem's will that this order exists.
Why you're not disagreeing with me?
Right. Well, maybe I'm not.
The natural order is a script.
Right. But the natural order, Hashem is not going to normally want to deviate from the natural order.
But you're not disagreeing with me. I didn't say that. I just said that
he could deviate, but he doesn't want to. That's I think.
I'm not talking about what he wants. What he wants, Teva.
The natural order.
Yeah, that doesn't.
It's a Teva. There is a Teva.
So
if I drop this pen, it's falling according to Newton's laws.
So
that's Hashem's will.
So you're not arguing with me.
Right. But I'm just
same thing.
Clarify.
Well, it's the same thing. So therefore, the way things happen. Now, the question is, why did the Rebbe make that script, right? So of course he did it for a reason, because that script is the greatest way that he can advance the tikkun process. That's why. Now, how and why? Obviously, there's certain things we can understand, but there are many. What you're going to talk about actually in the next parak, there are many things we don't understand. Why are there 300,000 species of beetles? Not beetles, species of beetles, right? You mean if there was 299,999 species of beetles, this world couldn't exist? No. That kind of wisdom we can never even begin to understand. Why there are 7,000 species of ants. You know what I'm saying? The interesting thing is that, and Darwin noted, only man is only one species. This is the only organism in existence that has only one species. Every other organism has many species, thousands of species. Only man has only one. And of course, the question is, why is that so? Nobody ever solved that problem. The answer is because, God only there's only one mankind and that's it. And so on, Although people have looked at some other people and said, this guy is not even human. He's not human. I mean, some of the acts that are committed, it's beyond measure.
Say
So.
we're cavemen or something? Are those considered considered human? They don't have Tzalma Elokim though, if they existed.
No. There's a medrash, you don't realize something. But which came first, apes or man? So Darwin said apes came first and then man. But the medrash says man came first and was changed to apes.
Because of Chatam.
Yes. Especially the two kufas. In the time of Shais, the medrash says that 1/3 of the world was destroyed. And in the time of Noach, where after the Noach, what the Baruch Shem did is he changed many neshamas, because even Goyim had neshamas then, still do, but and he changed them into apes. Koif. It's amazing. So therefore, that's why an ape, gorillas or apes, whatever, that's why they're so human. Because really they were human, but the Baruch Shem took away their Tzalma Elokim because they were part of the Chatoim and so on. I think by the Doha Flogo, and he made them into apes. So in evolution it's the reverse. The Torah, evolution of Torah is there was no such thing as apes and like that. It all came from man. Man was for Adam Rishon, and according to Darwin, of course, it's the reverse and so. But anyway.
But Bereshit says that animals were created before man, doesn't it?
Who? No.
Bereshit.
No, we don't know which animals.
Well, apes are animals.
No, that doesn't answer the question. Apes may be animals, but who says those animals were created? They could have been absent. It's only later, by man changing into apes, that you have apes. There were animals created, obviously, but who says apes were among them? No contradiction. You see? But the Medrash says clearly that they became koif, apes. That was one of the Oinshim, I think it was the Doha Floga, and so on, where many people lost their Tzalma Elokim and they became apes. Anyway.
What does it mean that the Satan has a claim to your neshama?
Because the rule is that if you give somebody credibility, that means you recognize their existence. Once you recognize their existence, then they have a connection to you.
So what happens?
So when you recognize that the Satan has power,
right,
that forms a connection between you and the Satan. You see? Okay. And therefore he has a claim on you, in the sense that he's connected to you. Yeah.
Does not be true. So he's lost.
Good question. Is he lost? Maybe. If he doesn't do tshuva, maybe. That's one of the reasons why you can't use kishuv, because then you connect to the Satan, because all power comes from the Satan. You see, I mean, all
Kishuv power.
The kishuv power, yes.
And white magic is perfectly acceptable to meditate on a divine name.
It's not asa, but you have to know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, what is white magic? When you meditate on a divine name, okay? When you what? For every act that God does, there is a divine name. For every act that he does, there's a divine name. So, in other words, that name refers to God, Ribono Shel Olam, as insofar as he did this act. Now, if you knew the names and you meditate on it and so on, then the Ribono Shel Olam would do that which you are meditating on, that act. So it's called Mashbiya Malachim. So if you know the acts that God does, remember when the Ribono Shel Olam does, he also does that. He gives the Malach the instruction, manipulates your alter self, and bingo, it happens, right? That's how he works. But if you meditate on a divine name, what that happens is the Ribono Shel Olam sends forth that force that makes the Malach do the script based on what you want. It's called Mashbiya Malachim. You are forswearing an angel by releasing that divine force, which forces the angel to manipulate that alter self in accordance with what your directions are.
Well, maybe it is.
Now, that is not good, because Malachim don't like to deviate from their task. So, if you don't know what you're doing, and whatever, because there are conditions and so on, then it's very bad news. There was once a Maisa, the Baal Shem Tov, with somebody else, I think it was also Adam Baal Shem, whatever, and they were doing something, and they knew what they're doing, and how to do it and so on, And all of a sudden, this was in the night, they were using it, and I think the Baal Shem, if I recall the story, the Baal Shem said to the other person, we need to stop. Do not fall asleep. If you sleep before dawn, you die. Whatever the case was, and they both had to stay up the whole night. About 5 minutes before dawn, the other guy, was the other one, he closed his eyes for a minute, and he probably fell asleep, for 15 seconds, and he died. So you have to know what you're doing. Malachim get very perturbed if you interfere with their, regular actions. But what's interesting is that
How
you do
is
not.
How is it a malachim have?
You do not wait. It's mida connected mida. Wait. But what? Let's see.
Sorry.
I forgot what I was going to say. So anyway, there's a disturbance of something because you're interfering with its normal task, whatever. But I forgot what I was going to
So let's
say.
say somebody's using these.
Anyway, 1 second. I got it back.
White magic is mutter to
Therefore, what's interesting is that to do this kind of magic requires no kedusha at all. Anybody can do it. It's like a mechanism. You just have to know the divine name, how to meditate, and so on, and then it's done. It doesn't require any kedusha, which is interesting. You see, it's a spiritual mechanism to do things without using the normal way, which is to intervene in the physical world.
Maybe it isn't a favor. If somebody creates a pot of gold using these names, and they say, "I don't want to work. I'm just going to create a pot of gold." So maybe they're doing a favor because they're bypassing the teva then.
Yes, that's true,
So it could be a favor.
but it's not kishuf.
It's not kishuf.
What's usher is kishuf, because then you are using the forces of the Satan. That's different, and that's kishuf. What was it? That's different, But to use the Kabbalistic forces, which is not usher. You just have to know what you're doing. But you can't play around. There's a book. It's written by Rabbi Moshe Zakuto, who's one of the Rebbes of the Ramchal. He wrote a book. It's in 2 volumes, and you can buy it in a store. It says how to do all this. It says how to become invisible, cure any disease. You can also, control anything. You can disappear from here and go, whatever they call that. I forgot. What? Yeah, but the real, you really disappear and you go. There's names for everything that you could meditate on, but there's a whole bunch of requirements. You got to meditate on a name, what the name is. Then many of them have to be written on parchment. When you meditate on them, some of them have to be written on a deer parchment. It's hard to get, or some written on regular parchment from a cow, and so on. There's all kinds of instructions. In fact, I think I said last week or 2 weeks ago that Moshe Rabbeinu meditated on the names that was on the Mateh, and that's how he did it. You see, in other words, in the end, everybody uses that mechanism called the altar self with the malachim and so on. That's because the universe can be controlled through its divine altars.
It doesn't make sense that we should be allowed to do that, though.
Nobody's going to do it anyway. You're not going to do it. But anyway, that's.
You can't use the Shem of Hashem if you have Tumas Metz and you have Paraduma.
What was that?
You said you don't need a Kedusha, but we have Tumas Metz.
Yeah. If you can meditate, but if you touch a mace, it won't work. There's a story where who was it? I think it was Rabbi Nechunya ben Akona, who was a Tana. He wrote the before the Chodoi, but that he was meditating and whatever he was doing, and he was in another heaven. It's Ruach HaKodesh. And for some reason, I don't recall, they had to ask him something, so they took a beged from a nida and they touched him. He instantly woke up. And they knew, you know. But it's true.
By Hashem or other people.
But you see, it's different, because that was Ruach HaKodesh. And what happens is you meditate and you ascend to another, your consciousness ascends to another world. So they could wake him up, because you can't do that if you're Tomei, you know. Probably this also you can't do if you're Tomei. It's probably the condition of the name, the Shem. It won't work if you have Tumah in you and so on, you know. But anyway, it's a whole book, and it's got a lot of stuff. But it's all about this. It's how to meditate on divine names, and as a result of that, interfere or intervene with that structure. You see? That's really what, and this all comes out of what the Ramchal is saying, that there's an alter universe, spiritual, which everything in this universe has a counterpart. It is controlled by Malachim, right? And that's called Teva. What's called Nes, we now understand. How Moshe Rabbeinu did the Nisim, how many miracles, that's white magic, what black magic is. You know, it's a whole, you have a whole shir on what all this really is. But like I say, it's all based on that one concept called the alter mechanism, the spiritual mechanism, Kochos Nivdolim, that everything has a counterpart.
So what's this Mida Keneged Mida of a Malach you try to manipulate them?
What was that?
You give instructions to a Malach to go beyond that normal function. Why does he come back and take revenge?
Because he's really mitzuvah by the Rebbeinu Shalom not to deviate. Remember, it's not that God is telling him, you are telling him. But meanwhile, that is going contrary to what his assignment is. You see? And that it's not a matter of emotions, it's a matter of you are disturbing my assignment. You know what I'm saying? And therefore, in a certain sense, I can disturb your assignment and harm you. You know, in other words, you are forcing me to deviate from my assignment. I will now do something to you that will make you deviate from your assignment, and that means harm. You see what I'm saying? So therefore, I'm just explaining the mechanism, and the mechanism has repercussions in, as you see, in many areas. How miracles work, and so on. You know, that's how it works. You know.
So all these people were like Rav Kali or Hashem, they made sure not to come across Tumas Mace?
Yeah. Well, they can't remove Tumas Mace because we don't have the Paraduma.
Right.
But obviously, this type of magic can work.
It can work even without?
Yeah, or else it wouldn't work, you know.